Welcome back guys to Voicey here and another r/MaliciousCompliance. Do you know the difference between 500 megabytes and 16 gigabytes? You know which one is bigger, right? Well, this lady doesn't, and she demands that her data plan be the larger 500 megabytes. Well, okay, as you wish. Just wait to see how much data she actually uses per month. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. This story was called Never Tick Off Your Tattoo Artist. Being Friday the 13th while waiting for my tattoo, I was reminded of a situation a few years ago with my friend Liz, who's my primary artist, and an especially Karen-type lady, and her Kyle-esque boyfriend, double K for both, who came in to get cheap tattoos. I watched this whole thing go down but wasn't involved per se. So Liz was doing a quick custom job on me and my buddy Chris. Yes, we got matching tattoos. Star Wars yin yang for those wondering. I went second so Liz and I could catch up. Double K bypassed the massive line out the door and down the stairs and walked straight up to the artist area to try to skip the line. This was shut down pretty quick and they were told there's a huge wait in front of them and they'll have to go to the back of the line. Well, Double K didn't like this one bit and started to throw a fit. Like legit tried to pull me out of the chair because he's getting what he wants and I was here first. She wasn't. I was there at 8 AM to help Liz load in OJ and donuts, and the 10 people in line before me knew this too. Well, one of the artists just finished and said, "I'll take you to." We were all kind of flabbergasted by this, but Liz got this big grin on her face, so I knew something was up. I figured the dude would do a terrible job, go too deep, use the wrong needle, something to just royally mess up their day. But he did none of this. He pulled his flash sheet and said, "Pick one." Karen picks something and he asks where she wants it. Back of her ankle. So dude gets to work freehanding it while Double K keep looking at the line like they won something. Well, they did win something. The smallest tattoo I've ever seen. This thing was no bigger than a dime. From 10 feet away, all you could see was a little black spot on her leg that looked more like a mole than a tattoo. Double K lost it, screaming about him assaulting her and forcing her to get a tattoo, and they're gonna call the cops and all that. Then, they tried to skip out without paying. They were rather impolitely informed that theft of service is a felony, and that cops are only 10 minutes away. They tried to pay up for the $13, but that's where the guy's brilliance really shone through. His sheet said custom at the top. All custom tattoos were $31. Not only did this lady have a very tiny and very intricately detailed tattoo, she only had a 50 on her and they had a big sign at the register that said simply, "No change." Double K ended up paying the shop minimum anyway, but she got her tattoo ahead of the line. I'm not sure why people feel entitled to skip a queue. Everybody else has to wait as well. There's nothing special about you. This story was called Self-Metering Flower Pot Defeats Homeowner Association. When I was in high school back in the late 90s, one of my teachers shared a story with the class in order to explain why we would have a substitute teacher in the next week. This is by far my favorite story in the vein of malicious compliance. My teacher was in his late 30s, married only for a couple of years, and over the summer, he and his wife bought their first house together. As is typical, the house was in a development that had a HOA. While he wasn't thrilled at the idea of a meddling HOA, it is a necessary and unavoidable evil. He went through their CCRs with a fine-tooth comb, and decided that while there was some stuff he wasn't a fan of, overall, he could live with it. So they signed the papers and bought the house. About a week after they move in, they get a non-compliance letter stating that the tree in their front yard was not an approved species and must be removed. Problem is, the tree was native to that spot, was estimated at 80 to 100 years old, and was a pecan. I mention the type for two reasons. First, a pecan produces nuts, obviously, and that is why the HOA said it can't be in the front yard. After all, a lawnmower flings a rogue pecan through a neighbor's window, and there will be an issue. The second issue is that this was in Dallas, Texas area. The pecan is the state tree of Texas and as such, gets a little legal protection. Basically, to cut one down, you need to have a permit. To get that permit, you need to have to show the tree is diseased or a hazard. Just being in the way is not sufficient. My teacher is upset as the tree is large, provides lots of shade, and he likes eating pecans. He writes back to the HOA, who turn a deaf ear and point to the CCR and refer him to their legal team for any further questions. He then contacts the county and state, who both come back with he can't remove the tree without a permit, or he will face a large fine and/or jail. He copies that letter and sends it along with his own letter in certified envelope to the HOA lawyers. The lawyers come back that the CCR is binding. He is not allowed to have fruit or nut producing trees in his front yard, but ornamental trees of flowers and flower pots, this part is important, are fine. If it isn't removed in 30 days, they will begin fining him. At this point, he gets his own lawyer and turns it over to him. A couple of months go by, and we are in the part of the story where he is explaining why there will be a substitute. He will be going to court to have a judge weigh in on the matter. The next week comes, and after the court hearing, he comes in and says that basically he lost, as the judge ruled the CCR did apply and the tree had to go. However, since it was a native tree at the time of development, the HOA would be responsible for all costs of removal, not him as the homeowner. Now, most people probably would have let it go at this point. Sure, you lost the tree, but it isn't costing you anything. Not my teacher. The man decided it was time to protest the overreaching HOA and their absurdity. So, he got to reading. After going through the CCRs thoroughly, he took a trip to Home Depot and bought some hose, fittings, and a nice Kohler toilet. He set the toilet up in the middle of the yard, right where the tree had been, and ran the hose and fittings to his outside faucet, so it was hooked up for water in, not hooked up to a sewer. This is the front yard after all. He then dumped some potting soil in the bowl and planted some decorative flowers. It took a few weeks, but the non-compliance letter came in stating that he had house waste in his front yard and it must be removed within 72 hours or he would be fined. He wrote back there was no house waste. They responded again and he stated they needed to come show him where this supposed waste was. The next day, a HOA guy comes out and points right at the toilet and says, "It cannot be there, it is an eyesore." My teacher responded, "Sorry you feel that way about my self-watering flower pot, but I see nowhere in the CCRs that state what style of flower pot is or is not allowed." HOA guy gets verbally heated and threatens to call the cops, to which my teacher agrees. Having his bluff called, the HOA guy leaves. A week or so goes by, and the class I am in is pestering our teacher every day for new stories on this. He said he got a letter from their lawyers, which he sent straight to his lawyer. His lawyer agreed with him that the CCR in no way, shape or form puts any qualifiers or limitations on flower pots, and as the flowers are clearly visible, it doesn't constitute debris or trash in the yard. A few back and forth things happen between the lawyers, and then the HOA moves for a trial, which gets the same judge as before. The judge reviewed the case and dismissed it as frivolous. He did put in his remarks or decision something along the lines of, "While the defendant's choice of a flower pot is eye-raising and isn't traditional, there is nothing illegal about his use of a commode as art in his yard. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate any sound reason this would violate existing rules and bylaws of their association." You have to be pretty gutsy to risk doing something like that, going for the throat of the HOA, despite your neighbors probably not being too happy with you. I wouldn't be surprised if a number of them actually supported and cheered him on. I doubt he would have had that as an art piece forever. I don't know, maybe he did. But at least a good point would have been made that their rules are a little bit silly. This story was called, "Want to cut my pay? Cut your business." This happened around 2008, when the economy went down hard. I was working in a small electric and computer lab, where we built some very high-end video computing product. I was assistant manager in the computer lab because I was the most experienced guy in the lab. Basically, there was no problem I didn't see before and couldn't solve, while the rest of my crew were beginners. Economy went down hard, but this business didn't suffer much. There are not that many people who know how to handle dedicated hardware in a dedicated field, so we were not worried about our job. However, our wretched CEO thought it was a great opportunity to save some money. First, he fired almost all my crew, leaving me with one guy only to handle all the work. Second, he announced a 20% cut in work time, which means 20% cut in pay. He gave us this offer: you can work 7.5 hours a day instead of the 9 hours in our contract, or skip 1 day a week. We worked Sunday to Thursday. My crew member agreed to cut the daily hours. I, however, decided to cut the day. One thing he neglected to decide is which day I cut. I did ask him, but he said, "You choose." So I figured it's my decision now, and I decided to take the last day from this week and the first day the next week, getting me a long 4-day weekend every 2 weeks. Great. It worked nice for a month. My pay was reduced, but I had a lot of free time, and I already started using this free time to improve myself. First thing, look for another job. At the end of the second month, the boss noticed something odd. The new guy got a call to solve a problem at Thursday, and he couldn't figure it out until Monday noon. A long time for a problem to be solved, and the client was not happy. He called my crew in and asked him why the delay, and the guy said he couldn't fix it and I wasn't available to fix it until Monday. So I get called in. First things first, why am I not available on my days off? Simple. I don't get paid for that, so screw you. Second, why the long weekend? Well, I explained to him that he gave me the authority to decide, and that's my decision. Boss man was ticked. He tried to stuff me over and I found he got screwed back. He claimed it's not right, that I should change the days back and be available while I'm not at work. I asked him if that's a management decision, because if it is, it's 3 strikes against me, and I am entitled to a month's salary and full compensation, which at this time was worth another 6 months' salary. He understood that he was royally screwed by me and withdrew his decision. He didn't give me my day back, so I continued looking, and by the end of the month I gave my notice. In my notice, I specifically stated the pay cut as my reason to leave, and with the other argument I constantly had with him the last month. I demanded 6-month compensation as per my contract. Bossman refused to budge, but I sent him a formal letter, threatening to sue him. He tried to make things right again and finally offered my day back, but too late. I already had another job with better pay and a better boss. Not much better though. Bosses will be bosses. At the end of the month I finally left. My last crew member was promoted to assistant manager instead of me, but they didn't give him the pay raise. He was ticked, and being a better man than me, he quit after only a month, and opened his own business, directly competing with the old boss. His main target was to harm the old boss, and he succeeded very well. His business grew and he made good money now, while the old boss had to pick up the pieces of his business. Now unable to service his clients, it got a major hit. Last time I checked, he closed the computer lab and shrinked the business from 10 people to 3. 2 of them are sales reps. Don't be cheap on your best employee. It will destroy your business. Your employees can be your biggest asset or your biggest liability. And like everything in life, you get what you pay for. It's worth rewarding good work with good pay. If you don't, you're just not gonna have motivated workers, are you? This story was called Can't Leave When I'm Done? Alrighty, I'm a field IT. Whenever a client has a problem, I am sent to solve it in his office. Yesterday, a client asked his server to be moved from its crappy spot on the entrance of the office to a designated, cooled room. Fine, that's easy enough. Before I leave to the site, the boss calls me and asks me to do it quick. He needs me to get to another customer too. That other customer is always time consuming. Anyone who gets there knows it's going to take the whole day, plus some extra hours without pay. And there is no parking in the area, which means I have to park in the inner building parking and fight my boss on the overpriced toll. And he asks me to get there after I have moved a server? Heck no. So I get to the first client and I'm all smiling and cooperative. Need another 30 minutes before I shut it down? Sure, take an hour. Don't want to replace the old crappy switch with a new one after I install the new one? No problem, I'll just take it off, repack it, install the old one back, easy. And then I struck gold. The old server UPS has stopped working and it damaged the server power unit. It took almost an hour to restart the server back. I am finally done. It's 3 hours past my boss's expected due time. I report to management that the project is done, and they tell me to stay at the place, while an outside specialist is testing the server for damages due to the bad power unit. No problem, sir. I spent another hour browsing Facebook and Reddit while that specialist is doing whatever. The okay comes, it's the end of the day. That other client? Oh, we have to reschedule, sorry. This story was called I Pay for 500 megabytes, I Want 500 megabytes. I work on a telecom sales line, but most of our calls are customer care or technical that end up pressing the wrong button because they use a super strange phrasing, so people get confused and we are obligated to try and sell them things. So most of the job is just transfer calls to other lines. So this lady calls. I want to know how many megabytes I have on my plan. Well, you apparently have 16 gigabytes. But in my contract it says I have 500 megabytes. Yes, but when you subscribed you must have gotten some special deal. But don't worry, 16 gigabytes is a lot better than 500 megabytes. The lady then gets really upset, screaming that if she pays for 500 megabytes, then that's what she wants to have. I ask her to wait till I transfer. I talk to my colleague in customer care before transfer, just to tell her that this is what the customer wants, and to her not even bother to explain that 16 gigabytes is better than 500 megabytes. Out of curiosity, I look at her data usage, and most of their cell phones expended somewhere between 2 to 4 gigabytes. So she will pay at least 20 or 30 euros in extra from now on. You know what they say, the customer's always right? Some people have to learn things the hard way. If she won't listen that 16 gigabytes is actually a better deal than the 500 megabytes she paid for, well, she's probably gonna have to pay from her purse. After all, she probably wouldn't have been happy if he said, well, I'm gonna leave it at 16 gigabytes. He wouldn't have heard the end of it. So, better to give her what she wants and she can see for herself. Post your stories, memes, and fan art at r/VoiceyHere. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. Alright Voicey veterans, I'll see you in the next one.